In this video, we're going to cover what equipment you need to buy for your open water diver course. Let's dive in. Welcome to Waterline Academy. My name's Paul, and whether you're new to diving or a seasoned professional, put some pressure on that subscribe button for weekly videos on scuba diving skills and tips. It's great when subscribers ask questions when they want to know something about scuba diving. Tucker Gallatin says, "Hi, I'm looking to start my open water certification. I'm curious as to what pieces of equipment should be purchased and which should be rented from a dive center." To answer that question, I'm going to touch on the items of equipment you're going to be using during your open water course. I'm going to give you my recommendation, but there's no point knowing what equipment you want to buy or rent if the dive center that you go to is going to force you into buying more than you really need to. So I'm going to go over the 3 different types of dive centers that you can take your open water diver course with and what they're probably going to ask you to buy or rent so that you can make the most informed decision about what type of dive center you want to take your course with. The equipment you're going to use on your open water diver course falls into 2 categories: hard equipment and soft equipment. Hard equipment is the scuba unit, the BCD regulator and cylinder. Now, I'm not going to go into what those items of equipment are and how they work, but if you'd like to see that video, let me know in the comments. Then you have soft equipment. And soft equipment is the mask, snorkel, fins, wetsuit and weight belt. Now, I don't know a dive center out there who's going to ask you to buy scuba equipment, the hard set of gear for your open water course. So I'm going to leave those items off the table entirely, and I'm going to concentrate on the soft equipment: mask, snorkel, fins, wetsuit and weight belt. The only equipment I recommend you buy for your open water course is a mask and snorkel. To make the best decision about the equipment you need to buy, you need to be comfortable diving. Until you're comfortable underwater, you won't be able to tell the difference between one item of equipment over another. So I think you should be buying your own mask and snorkel as soon as you start diving. Your mask and snorkel you're going to use no matter what type of diving you're doing. In fact, it's an item of equipment that won't change depending on the conditions that you dive in. Whether you're ice diving, wreck diving, diving in warm water, cold water, or anywhere across the globe, the mask and snorkel you use can be used in any conditions. I've had the same mask for over 20 years. It's been on more than 1,500 dives with me. I've lent it to friends, my wife's used it, and I have no intention of buying another one. If you'd like to see that mask on Amazon, I'll leave a link in the description below. I might earn a small commission if you did buy one. So why do I recommend against buying the rest of the soft equipment? Fins, wetsuits and weight belts. Well, those items of equipment are going to change depending on the conditions that you dive in. For instance, if you predominantly want to go snorkeling and might do some scuba diving while you're on holiday, you might be able to use a closed heel fin. A closed heel fin in warm water is a fantastic idea. However, if you go into colder water, or perhaps some of the diving you enter from the shore on the rocks, you might want to get an open heel fin and use them with booties. Those booties are going to protect your feet and keep your feet warmer. So immediately you can see that if you're diving in warmer water or colder water, the equipment you use is going to change. And that also accounts for your wetsuit. If you're diving in colder water, you may even want to consider using a dry suit. The range of wetsuits you use will change depending on the temperature of the water you're in. For instance, if you're in a warm tropical water, you may not need a wetsuit at all. If you start diving in temperate water, you may need a 5mm or a 7mm wetsuit. And if you get into really cold water, perhaps you want to go ice diving, you'll be using a dry suit. So the equipment that you use is going to change depending on the conditions of the diving. And that's why I recommend you do 25 to 30 dives before you have an understanding of what type of diving you want to do. You may like to keep this as a recreational sport and go diving only when you're on holiday in warmer climates. Or you may fall head over heels in love with scuba diving and want to dive every dive site you can find, be that warm water, cold water, wreck diving, ice diving, you name it, it's there for you to dive. But until you know the type of diving you want to do, I highly recommend against buying any equipment you don't need. Of course, if you know the type of diving you want to do, then owning your own equipment can make diving so much more comfortable. When I first started diving, I worked for the instructor who taught me to dive. For my first 50 odd dives, I had to use any equipment that wasn't being used on a course. That sometimes meant wearing a wetsuit that was too large or a BCD that was too tight. Having that experience did two things. It gave me a very good idea of what equipment I wanted to buy, and it made me very comfortable wearing any equipment that was available. The point I really want to make is that the equipment you buy or rent for your open water course should be up to you, not up to the instructor or dive center that you take your course with. So how do you pick a dive center that gives you the options you want rather than forcing you into a decision that only benefits them? Well, it certainly helps to know what types of dive centers there are and how they make their money, so that you can pick the dive center that gives you the options you want. If you'd like to see a map of your local dive centers and dive sites, then click on the link in the description of this video, which will take you to the My SSI website. Simply log in and enter your location for a list of dive centers and dive sites in your area. While you're there, you can start your open water diver course for free. You can even download an app and get started straight away. There are generally 3 areas where a dive center makes money: equipment sales, training, and travel. Now, I don't begrudge a dive center making money. In fact, you want to work with a profitable dive center. If they're not profitable, they'll skimp on service and safety. Almost all dive centers are going to make some money from each of those 3 areas, from the sale of equipment, training, and from dive travel. Most dive centers are going to have a core focus on one of those 3 areas. A dive shop that focuses on equipment sales, a training center that focuses on training, or a dive resort that focuses on recreational diving. Pretty much all dive centers are going to include the cost of renting scuba gear in the cost of the course. So you won't need to worry about renting scuba gear over and above the course price. But it's important to make sure before you start your course what is and what isn't included. To understand where a dive center is going to ask you to buy or rent equipment, you need to follow the money. And by that, I mean you need to follow their investment. Let me give you an example. If you owned a spaceship and you wanted to send people to Mars, they had to live on the spaceship for 3 years. During that time, you'll be charging them for the accommodation and the travel on that spaceship. That means that you're making your money while people are traveling on the ship. But in order to get on the ship, they need to take some training. Now, would you be charging an exorbitant fee for the training, which might prevent people from paying for the trip to Mars? Or would you simply charge them for the trip to Mars and include the training for free? Now, dive centers follow the same principle. They are business owners. And business owners will invest in assets that will generate them revenue. And so by following the investments of a particular dive center, you can quite quickly tell where they're making their money. For instance, a dive shop will invest in the shop itself. They may have a shop in a shopping center with very high footfall, and they'll invest in the displays in the shop. That means they're aiming to generate revenue from inside the shop, and that means the sale of equipment. And that means when it comes to training, they'll probably ask you to buy all of the soft kit, and they'll either charge you a rental fee for the scuba equipment or they'll include it in the cost of the price. That changes for a training facility. A dive center that's predominantly a training center will invest heavily in facilities like a pool, a classroom, and school equipment that they'll use during a course. They'll want to focus on recovering their investments in their training facilities, and without having the equipment there for you to do the training, they wouldn't be able to sell the courses. And so they are most likely to include all of the equipment that you need during your dive course. They may, however, ask you to buy a mask and snorkel and possibly some fins, but it's unlikely that they'll ask you to buy all of the soft kit. A dive center that operates predominantly as a dive resort will invest heavily in facilities like a boat and accommodation. That means they need to recover their investments in their boats and accommodation by getting people diving. If they didn't have rental equipment on site and somebody rocks up to go diving who doesn't have equipment, they lose money. That means they're quite likely to have all of the rental kit that you need for your course on site. And it's quite likely that they'll include all the equipment that you need for the course in the fee for the course. They're unlikely to ask you to buy any equipment. They may have a shop on site, but that shop will be aimed predominantly at keeping people diving, but they're unlikely to have a main focus on the sale of equipment. While we're on the topic of how dive centers make money, you might even be wondering how I make money on this YouTube channel. Well, much like a dive shop, I make money in 2 areas, through training and the sale of t-shirts. When you engage with this video, I earn a small amount of money from advertising. So please like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to this channel. It really goes a long way to helping me grow this channel. The other area that I make money is from the sale of t-shirts, and so if you'd like to take it just that one step further, please do that by buying a t-shirt either for yourself or another diver. All proceeds from the sale of those t-shirts go directly to making better videos for you and other divers. So please click the link to buy a scuba diving t-shirt or watch this video for more scuba diving skills and tips.